it's very dominant in this, in trying to understand Yitzchak. There's MH Yitzchak in Parshat Vayechi, okay, where he, what he noticed. Sometimes you used to think about Chassidish Torah as being very far from Pshat, but he's touching upon a question which is really a deep Pshat question. Is that when Yaakov switches his hands around, Yaakov's in a similar situation that Yitzchak was in. Namely, you have two children, one of which needs to be preferred. Right? Yaakov has no problem in actually switching his hands around in something that he was not available to Yitzchak. Okay, so he juxtaposes what Yaakov symbolizes with what Yitzchak symbolizes. So it lets us understand something about Yitzchak. It also, we'll see, helps us understand something about the nature of law, according to the MH Yitzchak. Okay? Okay, Sikelet Yadav. Right? That's the one that I sent you, right? I'm just doing it from the book, yeah? This is in Parshat Vayechi. Sikelet Yadav. Lihiyot. Ki Yitzchak Avinu hayam madrigato midat hagvura. Okay? All right, this you just have to accept as a given right now. We're not going to go into a whole theory of the midot. But b'chol zot, just to bring it down a little bit, what does it mean when we say that Avram is chesed or Yitzchak is gvura? What we mean to say is that, I'm going to put it in a way that people generally don't put it this way, but it means that the different characters in the stories of the Torah are, in a sense, characters in a dream that God is having. And the reason I put it that way is that the characters then become projections of certain aspects of the personality. Okay? If I have a dream, and I dream of someone, it has nothing to do with that person. That character in my dream is really a projection of some aspect of myself. Okay? So when you say Avram is chesed, what you're saying is that if you want to understand God's chesed, learn Avram Avinu's life. Avram Avinu is a projection of that aspect of God's personality. Okay? And that's what the Sfirot are. Okay? So he says that Yitzchak is Gvura. He's going to unpack that a little bit. V'lachein ratzah levarech et Esav. Ki midat hagvura moreh al divrei Torah. Gvura is midat hadin. And divrei Torah is a way of saying what the halacha is. Okay? So what's the halacha? Who should get the bracha? According to the law, the Bechor, right? So that's why Yitzchak wants to give the bracha to Esav, right? Because he's the Bechor. L'chein amar Yikov hadin et tahar. Okay? V'lachein lo haya b'kocho la'asot neged hamishpat. Because Yitzchak is the embodiment. See, when you're a character in a dream, you don't have bechira chafshis, right? You're just a projection of a character that exists already, of someone's personality that exists already, right? So Yitzchak doesn't have the koach to act freely. He is the embodiment of midat hadin. He is Yikov hadin et tahar, and therefore he has to give the bracha to Esav because according to the law, Esav is the one who has to get the bracha. So he has no choice. Okay? Ach ki Hashem yitbarach somech yadayim tahorot. This is the Hasidus part, which is very important also. Ach ki Hashem yitbarach somech yadayim tahorot ki hayadayim hein infei halev. Person's actions, and actually connected to what we were talking about before, in terms of the relationship between intentionality and actions, right? A person's actions are ramifications of what goes on inside. So a way of describing that is that hayadayim hein infei halev, the branches of your heart are your hands. Because what you do is a consequence of your inner feelings. It's an expression of your inner feelings. Right? So since, and this is where God gets involved, right? Since libo haya tahor mezukach, Yitzchak's heart is pure. So God is not going to God has to come in and save Yitzchak from himself. Yitzchak must give the bracha to Esav, because he is midat hadin. That is the din. And he has no choice but to fulfill the din, because that's who he is. But God will not let that happen. He somech yadayim tahorot. The yadayim tahorot, because the leiv is tahor. And since the leiv is tahor and the yadayim tahorot, so God will not let something, bad consequences come from a pure heart. Since everything is l'shem shamayim, so God guides it. Okay? Okay, hold on. V'libo haya tahor u'mizukach v'sivev hadavar shivarech et Yaakov below da'ato, without his consciousness, because he can't do it b'da'at. This also there's another thing here, that God in a sense is taken over. It's like automatic pilot, right? Yitzchak, when he says Yitzchak is libo is tahor, it means that in a sense he's totally open. When a person is totally open, then God can come in. And this has to do with relationships also. To let someone else in, I have to open myself up. If I'm full of myself, then I can't have an authentic relationship with somebody else. So libo is tahor. So Yitzchak is in a sense empty. So God enters and takes over, precisely because Yitzchak is gevura and he's yirat shamayim, and he just wants to fulfill the law, and it's not about himself, that God can come in. And God is somech yadayim tahorot. Okay? V'sivev hadavar shivarech et Yaakov below da'ato. V'al ze ne'emar ata tomech gorali. Aval Yaakov Avinu, now this is the juxtaposition between Yaakov and Yitzchak. Yitzchak could not change his hands around, but Yaakov can. Aval Yaakov Avinu haya mistakel tamid el habina ulitzon Hashem yitbarach. Hold on. V'lakach ne'emar yadati b'ni yadati sikelet yadav v'yasam et Ephraim lifnei Menashe. So what is he saying? He's saying, Yaakov, what's the relation between Yaakov and the law? Yaakov transcends the law, because there's the law and there's the giver of the law. If you're stuck on the law, then you just have to go by the letter of the law, and the greater considerations, you're not allowed to take them into consideration. Let me give you an example. Every legal system has the possibility of pardon. Why is that? Because there's certain things that a judge, when he's adjudicating and he's acting as midat hadin, is not allowed to take into consideration. If the person committed the crime, then they're guilty. It doesn't matter if the person had a hard childhood. They may be mitigating ta'anot for the onesh, let's say. Right? But to find someone guilty or not, that's midas hadin. Right? So if the person had a hard childhood or he had an easy childhood, if the person saved the world 20 years ago when they were young, but now they committed a crime, it doesn't matter, because this is midas hadin. Midat hadin is very atomic. You just look at the case. You don't look at the broader picture. You're not allowed to look at the broader picture. Let me tell you the story about the Brisker Rav, how we would do a Din Torah. The story is the Brisker Rav, when he would do a Din Torah, the Balei Din would come before him, he would put his talis over his head so that he wouldn't see the Balei Dinim. And he would just deal with the law. Because if you look at the person, you might be distracted or drawn by something else. Right? That's why you have in the law, lo tagur mipnei ish, da lo tehedar b'rivo. You're not allowed to take out external considerations. It's just the law. Okay? So that, in a sense,
that's Yitzchak.
What?
That's Yitzchak.
That's Yitzchak. Right? And that's what we mean, it's very important, when we say justice is blind, and Yitzchak is blind. It's not only the Greek myth of the goddess of justice is blind. Yitzchak is blind because he's not allowed to consider Yaakov for the bracha. It doesn't matter if Yaakov is in Ishtam, Yoshev Alim, if he's better, it doesn't matter. The Bechor gets the bracha. Right? So Yitzchak is blind because justice is blind. But Yaakov is the embodiment of Midat HaRachamim. And Rachamim is when you take the greater picture into account. So here I'm allowed to, and I have to take into account, look, the guy saved the world. Right? So imagine Winston Churchill, right? He saved the world twice. He saved the world in World War I, and he saved the world again in World War II. And he was speeding on the M40, let's say, right? So he was guilty. So he got, right? But did you say, but the man saved the world twice, give him a break. The judge is not allowed to give him a break, right? The queen can give him a break, right? Because they can be, so that's where you need the institution of pardon, because there's a recognition that there are super legal considerations that the law is not allowed to consider. The judge is not allowed to consider it. Yitzchak is not allowed to consider it. He's blind. He has to be blind. But there are these other considerations which are embodied by Yaakov, and his whole existence is an embodiment of this type of shlemut, of this looking at the bigger picture. Okay, that's what Yaakov symbolizes, and how he came to symbolize that is beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about now. Okay, but let's continue. So Yaakov looks at what's called the Bina U'Ritzon Hashem. He doesn't look at the law. He can look at the source, because God is infinite. And what that means is that he's infinitely present in every moment, and every moment is distinctly different from every other moment. And that means that there are no principles. As if there are no law, as if there's no law of gravity. That every time you drop the apple becomes detached from the tree. You don't know if it's going to fall or not. Right? It's the law of gravity that tells you it will fall, but there is no law. Every event, God makes it fall in a sense. Every time he decides again to make it fall, and tomorrow he can decide to make it, not that it shouldn't fall, that it should fall up and not fall down. Right? There are no laws. Since every moment is independent, there can be no laws. There's only Ritzon Hashem in this particular moment. And that is what Yaakov is attached to. Yaakov looks at Ritzon Hashem and he's conscious of it. He's connected to it. And that's why he can say, Yadati b'ni yadati. His yediyah is chibur, right? Adam yadat chava ishto. So he's connected to Ritzon Hashem in a way which transcends the law. So even though it's usher, this is very, very important. That the law, in the way he sees it, and it's Chassidut in general, but it's very accentuated by the MH Yitzchak, the law is what you use when you don't know what Ritzon Hashem is. The law is what you have when you have Hester Panim. You don't know what God wants, so you do the law. You go according to the principles that guide you. The principles have to guide me because God himself isn't here to guide me. If God was here himself, I wouldn't need the law. He would tell me directly. So Yaakov has the direct line. He is Tamid Hayam Mistakel Tamid El Habina U'Ritzon Hashem Yitbarach. The word Bina here is crucial, because how does he know God's will? It's not intellectual. He's not Mistakel El HaChochma, he's Mistakel El Habina. The Bina is in the Lev. There's a refined religious and spiritual intuition that Yaakov has that puts him in a place of consciousness, of yadi'ah, of consciousness of God, which transcends knowledge of the law. And that allows him with sakelet yadav, that he can go against the law because he's connected to something that's beyond the law. Let's see, he spells this out. Vayomer, ha'elokim asher hitalchu avutai lefanav, ha'elokim ha'ro'eh oti ma'odi. Hainu, this should really be one piece. Hainu, Yaakov Avinu haya maktin atzmo neged avutav Avraham Yitzchak. Let's see, va'amar ki lahem haya chochma u'bina gdola ma'od, ki al archivu et ritzon Hashem yitbarach me'atzmam. They had some, this is scientific theory also. How do you form laws? You collect empirical, any scientists here? Am I sticking my neck out? So you'll tell me if I'm right or wrong, right? Because I'm not a scientist. But you collect empirical data. Okay? You look for the common denominator, and you extrapolate a law. First it's a theory, and then the theory becomes a reliable, becomes a law, right? So this is what, when you say Avram is chesed, or Yitzchak is gvura, that's what they did. They took a little bit of divine data, in a sense, and they extrapolated it. So Yitzchak is always din, Avram is always chesed, right? Because they go according to general principles. They were able to take a little bit of data and expand it into a way of life. Okay? So, and me, I don't know. I never know what to do. Right? This is Yaakov. I never know what to do. I always have to go back and ask God what to do. Right? V'af im patach lehem Hashem Yitbarach petach katan, a little bit of divine stimuli. Let's put it that way. Hayu marchivim u'mitpashtim oto b'chochmatam kidei lasot ritzon bor'am. V'hevinu af b'davar shelo he'ir lehem Hashem Yitbarach meforash. They figured it out for themselves. That's what you do when you learn halacha. God doesn't tell you the law. You have to figure it out for yourself. So you get some raw data and you figure it out for yourself. That's what midat hadin is. Chesed is also like that. Okay? V'zeh perush asher hithalchu. Hainu shayu holchim b'kocham. Aval ani, this is Yaakov speaking, ha'elokim haro'eh oti me'odi ad hayom hazeh. Hainu. B'chol prat ma'aseh shani oseh. Ani tzarich sh'Hashem Yitbarach ya'ir einai. Echu ritzono Yitbarach. I always have to go back to God. I don't understand anything by myself. Avram Avinu, Yitzchak, they knew how to learn. They could figure out what to do. They didn't have to ask God. Right? Me, I always have to ask God. I can't figure it out. Right? So I'm always looking back with some sort of intuitive faculty to God. So he understood that as a lower level. Right? Because in a sense, there's less human activity. It's just my intuition. Yaakov understands himself as being inferior to Avram and Yitzchak. V'af b'zeh ma'aseh shira'iti echu ritzono. Right? Even in this story of Ephraim and Menashe, I intuited this is what I have to do. I can't go by the law. I don't know what the law is. Im ritzono l'shanota. But I don't know. Maybe he'll change his mind. Mikol makom tzarich ani l'r'ot gam b'pam hashenit echu ritzono. I can never rely. Well, in the last time I was in this situation, this is what God wanted. So now, this is again what God wanted. No, you can't rely on that because God is infinitely present in every moment. So every moment is unique and different. So you cannot extrapolate. All of law is about extrapolating principles from one case to another case. Right? But if I undermine the commonality between the cases, then I have no principles. There is no law. Right? See, saying law is an illusion. Right? It's a human construct which we create in order to explain divine phenomena. Avram and Yitzchak had that, but Yaakov did not see that. So he thought, I don't understand anything. Let's see. ובאמת בזה העניין היה יעקב הגדול שבאבות. כי זאת היא המדרגה הגדולה שהשם יתברך מנהיג את האדם תמיד. וזאת הייתה תפילת דוד המלך, השם רואי לו אחסר. היינו שלא אחסיר ההשגחה, השם יתברך עליי, ורק שיהיה רואה אותי תמיד. וגם אני אכיר תמיד שהשם יתברך הוא רואי. That there's a constant presence. כי השם יתברך בטובו מנהיג כל דבר, אך שהאדם מחזיר פניו ואינו רוצה לצפות ולהתפלל. ובעת שאדם יתפלל תפילה שלמה, אז תקף יענה, ויראה כי השם יתברך הוא הרואה אותי. וזה פירוש לא אחסר, listen to the play on words, היינו שלא אחזיר פניי ממנו. לא אחסר, לא אחזיר. I'll always be facing God, and I'll never look away. Whereas the looking away, it looks at halacha as looking away from God. Because God is not instructing you directly, you're trying to figure it out yourself. So these are the klalim that you have when you don't have access to God. Right? But when...
You're going to go past 8:30?
No.
Upstairs?
No, you can down here. I don't want to disturb you.
No,
just 3 minutes.
Upstairs.
No, it's okay.
Yeah?
Yeah. Thank you. So the tension that exists here, right, between the law on one hand and Ritzon Hashem on the other hand, right, undermines the entire Litvish approach, right? That what is the halacha? Ratzon Hashem is the halacha. Right? How do you know what God wants? God is totally other. Right? You have no access to God. The only way you know what God wants is what the Shulchan Aruch says. Right? That's bigadol. That's also conservative Protestant theology. Okay? But you have no access to God at all. But here, there is access to God that transcends the law. Right? There's a different faculty that he's talking about. Right? And that's what Yaakov is in sync with. That Yitzchak is the law. Right? Yikov adin et ahar. The bracha has to go to Esav. The bracha has to go to Esav. He has no choice. But Yaakov is the embodiment of that. That no, even though according to the law it has to go to Esav, but there's something greater than the law, and that's why the bracha goes to Yaakov.